So now we'll go back. Extant species are species that there are still individuals alive in. Now notice these are not species, these are actually larger groups. If you look at this cladogram, notice it's a little bit different than some of the cladograms that we've looked at. There are some groups, like if you look at ichthyosaurs, here are the ichthyosaurs right here, and notice that their line stops at this point. Well, if we go up to the top of our chart, if we go across from mammals and turtles, and if we go across, we can see, oh, 1, 2, 3, maybe about 7 groups in total that it looks like their lines reach up to the top. These are groups that are extant. They have some living species. But if we look at groups like the ichthyosaurs that don't make it all the way up to the top, or here we have a group called the Saurischian dinosaurs, they don't make it all the way up to the top. These are groups that are completely extinct now. So I think in the cladograms that we've looked at before, we've only had extant groups on them. But we do sometimes have groups that are extinct. Sometimes this isn't indicated, but really, since our y-axis is time, groups that are extinct should not have their line continuing up to the present day. That's a little bit misleading. So we're going to look at a couple questions about this, and the questions are on the next page. So which group is the common ancestor of all the other groups on the chart? So for that, we have to look down at the very bottom. So we have some early amniotes. These are our common ancestors. And notice that, remember we said you could think of this kind of like the goalposts in football. Everything else branches off from these early amniotes. So they eventually evolved into all these other species. Which groups became extinct without leaving any descendants? So to determine this, we have to look at all the lines that don't make it up to the top. So it looks like plesiosaurs went extinct without leaving any ancestors. It looks like ichthyosaurs went extinct without leaving any ancestors. Notice that something like lepidosaurs didn't go extinct without leaving any ancestors. This vertical line represents lepidosaurs, but there are some ancestors of lepidosaurs that are alive today. Tuataras, lizards, snakes. This line doesn't go all the way up. This is Saurischian dinosaurs, although the name is a little bit off kilter. Looks like this line doesn't go all the way up. This is Ornithischian dinosaurs. This line doesn't go all the way up. This is pterosaurs. Notice that dinosaurs represent this group of reptiles. Notice that pterosaurs, the flying dinosaurs that you might have seen in some movies like Jurassic Park, are not really dinosaurs. They're a different group of reptiles. There were no reptiles that, no dinosaurs, I'm sorry, that flew. And then if we look over here, there's a group called para-reptiles. And para always means next to, think of parallel lines, they're next to each other. So para-reptiles are next to reptiles. So we have the mammals on this group. Notice that mammals branched off from reptiles very, very early. And we have the para-reptiles over here. And they're actually considered to be a very primitive type of reptile. But all the other things in the middle are reptiles of one sort or another. Notice that birds are included in this group. A lot of biologists consider birds to be one particular group of dinosaurs. Birds actually evolved from the group that includes things like velociraptors and Tyrannosaurus rex. So we tend to put birds in a separate group, but a lot of biologists disagree with that. Now, let's look at some of the other questions. Okay, so that was number 2. Which groups have survived until the present day? Okay, so now we're going to look at all the lines that go across up to the top. And, you know, might be helpful to print this out and use a ruler, but it looks like mammals, turtles, tuataras, lizards, snakes, birds, and crocodilians are the groups that have survived to the present day. And notice if we wanted to go back and double check, we could look at our answers for number 2, because everything in this chart should be included either in number 2 or number 3. They either survived to the present day or they didn't. Those are kind of the only 2 options. Number 4, which groups that have survived until the present day are most closely related? Why? Okay, so which groups that have survived until the present day are most closely related? So notice we're only looking at those 7 groups that we talked about that still have species around. So we're thinking about mammals, we're thinking about turtles, tuataras, lizards, snakes, birds, and crocodilians. And usually the easiest way to answer this is to look at all the groups that are around right now and work our way down the chart. Notice as we go down the chart, we're going back in time. And remember one of the rules that we talked about the other day when we look at a cladogram. The more recently 2 groups have separated, the more closely related they are. And if we go down, the 2 groups that are alive today that separated from each other most recently are lizards and snakes. So lizards and snakes are the most closely related. Why are they most closely related? Because they separated from one another most recently. And remember what I said the other day, when we have a why question about our cladogram, the answer is almost always going to be because these groups separated the most recently, or because this was the first group that separated. Those are about the only 2 whys we're going to see for our answers. Which extant group are crocodiles most closely related to? Why? Okay, so crocodiles are this group in here. So who are they most closely related to? Why? Well, if we look, the group that's still around, that's still extant, that's separated from them most recently is the birds. So crocodiles are most closely related to birds. Why? Same why as we had before, because crocodiles separated from birds more recently than they separated from anything else. Notice when crocodiles separated from birds, they had already split off from lizards and snakes and tuataras and turtles and mammals a long time ago. So crocodiles have separated from birds most recently. That's why. Are crocodiles more closely related to lizards and snakes, or are they more closely related to birds? Well, we really just answered that. They're more closely related to birds. Now, notice if we were thinking about lizards and snakes, and actually also tuataras, that crocodiles are equally related to lizards, snakes, and tuataras, because notice if we look at this spot right here, at that point, crocodiles split off and the lizards and snakes and tuataras split off. It was really their common ancestor back then. But that means that crocodiles aren't more closely related to snakes than they are to lizards. And they aren't more closely related to lizards and snakes than they are to tuataras, or vice versa. So when we look at the split point here, turtles are equally related to everything on this side of the split. Crocodiles, I'm sorry, I think I said turtles. And notice that even includes the extinct groups. Which group is least closely related to the other groups? Why? Okay, well, most closely is who has split off most recently. Least closely related, which group separated first? So if we look, our first separation, the original animals that separated were called synapsids, but then the modern day descendants of the synapsids are mammals. So you could say synapsids are mammals, are least closely related to all the other organisms on the cladogram. Why? Because they separated from the other groups first, or they split off from the other groups first. So any questions about how we answer these types of questions with a cladogram? We'll have another sample. I'm going to have one that I'll give you tomorrow, because I'm going to give you a couple of homework problems to work on over the weekend, and I'll give you some sample questions similar to what you might see on the test, so you can kind of get used to how I ask questions, and we'll look at those on Monday. So let's look at the other problems that we're going to work. I'm sorry, Samuel, do you want that back up?
Yeah, number one. I didn't really get the number one order.
Sure, let's go back there for a minute.
When you answer the first question, so which group is common ancestor to all the child? Guys.
So the common ancestor is always the one that's the oldest that everything else descended from.
All right. Thank you.
And notice that this cladogram is sometimes called a phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetics is who is descended from, which other species. And if you think of this as a tree, the common ancestor is kind of the trunk or the root of the tree, as opposed to all the branches that come off later.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
If there's a question about turtles.
Sure.
For the clade questions, it's asked if turtles are more closely related to crocodiles than lizards and snakes.
So if we look at this, now remember what we said yesterday, depending on what we consider DNA or anatomy, we get different results. But according to the characteristics that were used to develop this cladogram, if we look at turtles, notice here's the point where turtles split off from really lizards and snakes and crocodiles. Notice this area would represent the common ancestor of lizards and snakes and crocodiles. So really, turtles are equally related to all three of those groups. We can't say they're more closely related to one of them because they split off from all of them at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Are there some other questions? Okay, let's go back, and we're actually going to look at two of the sheets that we looked at earlier. So let's go back to the sheet that we looked at about Hardy-Weinberg problems. And I think you should see our black and white squirrels now. Let me know if that's not what you're looking at. And we worked several of these problems. And what I would like you to work on for Monday is problems 4 and 5. Notice problems 4 and 5 don't give you, let's make that 5 and 6 instead. Notice problems 5 and 6 don't give you a picture. They give you some numbers and they tell you what's dominant and recessive. So remember, to work a Hardy-Weinberg problem, what you always have to look at first is find the frequency of individuals that show the recessive phenotype, whatever it is. So in number 5, you're going to be looking at pea plants that have dwarf stems. In number 6, you're going to be looking at guinea pigs that have white hair. Those are the recessive phenotypes. And then the next step you're going to take is you're going to take the square root of the recessive phenotype, because when you take the square root of the recessive phenotype, that will give you the frequency of the recessive allele. So if you don't remember how to work these, go back and check our Zoom video or our notes, and you can get some hints. So I'd like you to work 5 and 6, and I'll send this out in case you forget the numbers. And then I'm going to have you work one more problem. And you should be looking at our peppered moss now. And we worked problem A in class, and then I ask you to work problem B. So I'd like you to finish up B if you didn't finish up that, and also look at number C. So on the peppered moss, do B and C. On the Hardy-Weinberg, do 5 and 6. Are there any questions? Now these will be due Monday, and the other thing I'll give you is I'll give you some sample questions like you would see on the test. Somebody told me that the monohybrid cross scores that you can't see those. So I'm going to have to go back in and see if I didn't make them visible like I did in the class notes or something. So those should be up later. Right now, the recordings for all our Zoom meetings, except Monday, which I forgot about, should be on the YouTube channel, and I'll put this one up later today when everything gets done. So are there any questions about natural selection problems or Hardy-Weinberg problems or cladogram analysis?
So can we get back to you during the weekend?
Yeah.
If I have a problem, some issues, because I have to go back to those videos.
Yeah. Send me
All right.
send me an email or something if we need to. We'll have a Zoom meeting.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, I will let you go then. Keep in mind, if you're looking for the Hardy-Weinberg problems and you're looking for the natural selection problems, those are from last week. So go back to module 2 to find those. If you missed when we discussed how to work those problems, the Zoom recordings are up on YouTube, so you can look at those again. You can also look at the notes and get some information about how to do it, but the Zoom recordings probably give you a little more detail. So for once, you get out a little bit early today. So enjoy the weekend. Send me an email if you have any questions. We'll see if we can resolve the questions by email, but if not, as I say, we'll schedule a individual Zoom meeting and we'll see if we can figure it out in a Zoom meeting or something. But otherwise, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the weekend, and I'll see you bright and early Monday morning.
Thank
Bye.
you.
You're welcome.
Have
Bye-bye.
a nice weekend.
You
Thanks, and have a
too.
good weekend.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Hopefully we won't all be snow again Monday, it sounds like.